Okay, since the webinar is recorded, the communication person is happy to share the record in the XCB social media. So we can start. I will keep an eye on the uh, on the waiting room in case we have new participants. So welcome to this webinar on the marine conservation in the Global South. Today we have two very valuable speakers from Central America and from Africa. From Central America, we have Daniel Arrows, who is a marine conservationist from the civil society sector. He is the executive director of the Marine Center of the Rescue Center of Marine Species in Costa Rica. Daniel, you are graduated from the University of Costa Rica and the University of Cambridge, and your activities focus on sea turtle monitoring. You promote education, science, and sustainable fishery. Daniel is a National Geographic explorer and an age fellow. And our second speaker is Ife Okafor. Ife is a lecturer at the University of St. Andrew and also a PW Marine Fellow. Your research focused on the blue economy, environment justice, maritime governance, human security and natural resources management. Your work highlight between resources depletion with maritime security, poverty, and inequality. You are the editor of the book, The Law of the Sea in Africa. Welcome to our two guest speakers. We will start, and before we start, even it's also a pleasure to inform you that the Society for the Conservation of the Biology Marine Section is organizing its eighth edition of the conference. The IMCC which will be taking place in the United Kingdom in November. You have more information before the end of this webinar, and you have the links to apply for abstract in case you have a presentation or in case you want to network with people at the conference. Ife, you can start by taking us through the work you are doing, how to inspire people in marine conservation in the Global South. You can share your screen and you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me. Please let me know when is it visible?
Is coming.
Okay.
Well.
Is it here? Okay. Thank you so much. All right, let me start the slideshow. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you again for the invitation. It's such a joy to be able to share my work with you today. I will be discussing nothing about us without us. And this quote encapsulates the position of global artisanal fishers, a statement or call to action that they produced in 2023 at the end of IAFA. And it is essentially my view or my contribution to this call is to note that data validation is a form of epistemic justice and something that researchers, policymakers, and implementers should absolutely consider as part of their work. I'll first give the context, and which would include the importance of ocean resources for Africa, and then I will talk about Sankofa, which introduces how our work is trying to yield to this call of nothing about us without us. And then I would give example of data validation in action, the impact that we've seen at least, and I will conclude. Marine conservation is expanding globally for different reasons that a lot of us, a few of us that are currently in this presentation are aware of. But for many coastal communities across the globe, including those on the African continent, the space to fish, what this means is, of course, for them that the space to fish, live, and participate in these conversations is continuously shrinking, as they are almost always an afterthought and not considered alongside the conversation. And what are the core problems? Of course, for different regions, even on the African continent and across the globe, the core problem would be different. But I have tried to categorize this with the view of highlighting what I see from the work that I do as the core problems. The core problem is that marine conservation is fragmented into resource extraction, including fisheries, mineral extraction, and who knows what would happen with the quest by so many countries to start exploring the seabed, and then exploration of hydrocarbons, which is currently ongoing across many oil producing states on the African continent. There's also trade, which obviously crisscrosses with shipping. There is aquatic ecosystem degradation, global warming, pollution, ocean acidification to contend with, and all these things are requiring policies to address them. And then there is conservation, and finally security, and including security because for the African continent, threats to piracy and armed at sea is something that is very worrying for them, and governments are responding by instituting laws that have implications directly or indirectly on artisanal fishers. All this operate in policy silos because they don't speak to each other interchangeably, yet their impacts converge on the same communities. And here I'd like to highlight the importance of oceans resources for the African continent with the view of positioning why it is important to have this conversation. Africa's relationship with the ocean, I would say that African oceans is an embodiment of tradition. Different scholars and different people have highlighted the importance by describing it as a locus of life, very important for health and sustenance. The interaction with the ocean is governed by mutual reciprocity and governance that is framed in different ways, governed by taboos, deities, sacred sites, and ceremonies as a way of not only treasuring, but highlighting this reciprocal relationship that Africans historically have with the oceans. I do say historically because that relationship doesn't exist in the same way it existed then as now. And when I say that relationship in terms of that traditional, some of the reciprocal, and the way that they show or manifest this respect or reverence in certain communities, it has changed in comparison to what it was before. In terms of the contribution of the oceans to livelihood for Africans, it is an important source of food, specifically fisheries, and also income, providing food security for over 200 million Africans. It's a source of protein in some communities. It's actually the only source of animal protein that is consumed by coastal communities. It has also been described in some quarters as a 10 empowerment scheme, and I'm emphasizing fishing here, with the fisher fishing or producing the fish and then empowering the unloaders, the distributors, the processors, the fishmongers, of which if anything happens to disrupt the ability of the fishers to fish, it doesn't just affect them, it also affects these other people that are part of this chain reaction. In terms of the contribution, I also want to acknowledge the important role that women play in fisheries, even though not directly in production, especially marine fisheries, the role they play in post-harvest sector, with an estimated 80% of seafood being marketed by women. And here I'd like to highlight the disruption. Historically, I could say that traditional fishers had so much space to fish. But as time went by, the space started reducing with the expansion of the blue economic sector, expansion of port infrastructure, introduction of tourism, of shipping, expansion of critical maritime infrastructure, laying undersea cables and pipelines. All those things together result in the reduction of traditional fisher space, often without conversation, often without compensation, and often without even consideration, which makes them an afterthought. And then structurally, there are also issues alongside the factors we've already highlighted. There is now this recognition for conservation. We see this in the call on the SDG 14 for conservation, including MPA. We also see this with the CBD 30 by 30. Specifically, I want to highlight target 1 of the Kunming framework. And then BBNJ, whilst it is not implemented per se, and we do not know how this is likely to affect artisanal fishers, it is likely if you look at the current dynamics around industrial fishing activities and its direct or indirect implication on the activities of traditional fishers. And then there are fisheries governance framework, the UNCLOS, the UN.
Excuse me.
Sorry. The UN fish, the UN UNCLOS, the UN Fish Agreement, the RFMOs, and sustainable fisheries, small-scale fisheries guidelines, the lack of implementation or lack of full implementation, at least on the African continent. All this poses a challenge. And then there's also the trade and economic drivers. Specifically, I want to highlight the WTO Fisheries Subsidies Agreement. These frameworks are designed separately, but are experienced simultaneously by fishers. Again, there have been conversations have been heard in different rooms without necessarily having a clear understanding of how this affects the people that it is meant for. This is a local resource users. What are the missing links? The policies, data, and communities exist. However, knowledge is often not shared. Of course, in the work that a lot of us do as researchers, as policymakers, as implementers, and even donors, we are often very keen to collect data, but we never, ever, I mean, in most instances, it's not traditional to think about going back to share the same data that has been collected from these communities. Communities are also not recognized as epistemic actors. They are more or less seen as people that can be extracted from. This is where evidence stewardship comes in and the core of my presentation. Going back and validating our data and why it matters. So the term or the inspiration for this idea comes from our project, which has been locally named Sankofa project in Ghana. Sankofa is a local Akan word, meaning go back and retrieve it. And this is essentially what we have used for our project, which is currently not the topic of my presentation. In this context, we are using it, at least for this presentation, to signify recovery, revalidation, and ethical circulation of knowledge. And we do this, or the aim of this is because we believe that it addresses epistemic injustices, historical ones, and positions communities as epistemic agents with authority to interpret, contest, and validate the data that we have interpreted without them. So coming back to share with them does this. And it reframes data collection and data validation as epistemic repair, addressing historical marginalization and restoring community ownership. In qualitative research, scholars term the idea of validation member checking, and they argue that this helps with building trust. But the way we have framed it, we're not seeing it as member checking, we're seeing it as something that is absolutely a must be a must happen. If data collection is important for research, then in the same way, data validation should be seen as equally important as part of the data collection, or even the thinking about the research in the first place. And how have we done this? So this is not an abstract or a thinking that we believe, oh, this is what we believe, we haven't tested it or tried it. We have, and we see that it's actually quite easy to do if from the beginning the idea have almost always been not to make your work, be it data collection or research, extractive or continuing the extractive nature or helicopter nature of doing research. So we started from co-designing. So from the time the idea of this project was born, this is actually part of my Pew Fellow project. I engaged with local communities so that whilst my idea was relevant, their idea was also relevant to formulating at the proposal phase initially, because I already had relationship with different communities and fishing associations in Ghana. And so they more or less contributed in designing the idea of a project. And when it was funded, the collaborators were identified, and we also, 4 of us, worked together to ensure that we are speaking the same language, in that this is an idea that we think has a contribution theoretically, but at the same time, policy-wise and in practice, that it fits into the ideas and the conversations that are already being had at the local, national, and even regional level. And this is how we had categorized the collaborators that we're working with. We ensure that local communities, fishers themselves, were part of the data collection. They were trained. At least we had 2 fishers in our team, and this was absolutely amazing. It helped us so much. They all obviously then played a big role in data interpretation. This allowed for reciprocity, true benefit sharing, capacity building, and long-term relationship, in that there were 5 teams in Ghana that received training. We also shared equipment that allowed them to continue to do their work. This meant that when we left, that we didn't leave with our equipment as well. We also were able to empower them to continue doing the work at the time they were actively collaborating with us. And then we validated the data. We came back and shared the data with the communities. And amongst other things, doing all these things ensure that, I guess the best way to say it would be platforming resource users, fishing communities in this instance, in dialogue with policymakers and implementers, because we were also equally engaged and interacting with policymakers and implementers in Ghana and at the FCWC region. This is Fisheries Committee for West Central Gulf of Guinea, whom we were collaborating with. I want to share briefly the data or the stats for our data collection. We engaged 833 fisher folk from 4 regions in Ghana: the Western, the Central, the Greater Accra, and the Volta region. There were 8 major fishing communities that contributed to data collection and 15 landing sites in general. And the data collection happened in July, from 1st to 27th of July 2024. And although we continue to collect some sort of data here and there beyond that, but this was the main data collection phase to coincide with the fisheries close season that was being implemented at the time. And then we, of course, came back to validate, and I want to talk briefly about the local fishers renaming the project, because actually I can't even remember the full name of our project. It was integrating indigenous knowledge or something similar. Just because obviously this has been happening since 2023, I can read it, but the local communities would not use the official name, so they were just calling it the Sankofa project, and I too have adopted it as Sankofa project. But then, of course, in official documents, we are still the integrating everything else project, or the ISPIC project as the abbreviation. But because we understood the importance of data validation, which was something that was highlighted from the beginning based on previous experiences, that data is never shared back. It's like you come and collect and then you say bye, and they never really understand how the data is used or understand what the data says it doesn't empower them enough to be able to speak back to their policymakers. So we tried to correct this, hence validation was embedded. We spoke to over, well, not spoke to, but as part of the validation, we engaged over 510 people from more than 25 communities, or even up to 30 communities, including those that were not part of the initial data collection. We opened up the invitation to chief fishermen and queen mothers and fish processors and other service users. And I want to highlight this quote from the Western region, which was the place we did the first validation in September 2025. A chief fisherman noted, we have been engaged several times in the past, but never received feedback. Thank you for coming back to share the findings with us. And this is important, not just because they were thanking us, but because of what it means. For us, the validation actually helps with ensuring that the findings empower the communities so that they can continue the conversation with their policymakers and implementers when we go back. And of course, now I'm currently back in Scotland in St. Andrews. The PhD student is also finalizing her research, but the people making the noise and engaging with the policymakers with the data and the findings are the fisher folk. And if we didn't go back to share these findings, they wouldn't be able to assess the data in the peer-reviewed research or the policy brief that we would have published at the end of this. And so what are some of the impacts? Because of course, as part of the validation as well, we also did a policy launch where the Minister for Fisheries and Aquaculture was actually the chair the guest of honor of the event, which was quite good for us. But what are some of the impacts we've noticed or we've observed? Of course, the impact that local communities and collaborators would differ from us, but we noticed that collaborators were empowered and they cited that our project opened more opportunities for external funding for them and discussions with government as community-led data collection. And secondly, we were invited by the Ministry of Fisheries and Aquaculture of Ghana to be part of the side event that they hosted. We co-hosted more or less, titled Harmonizing Indigenous Knowledge. This was for UNOC 2025, and it was really a privilege to have been invited to share the findings from this research. And then also in November 2025, we were also invited to be part of this conversation with chief fishermen at the first National Chief Fishermen and Queen Mothers Conference in Ghana, where the president gave the keynote. This also shows that the government are already taking these conversations very seriously. And I do not think that any of these things would have been possible if we had not thought of the way we were engaging research and rooting it in local communities and ensuring that they were part of it, not just at the data collection, but from inception down to the finishing. And I'm highlighting some of this quote just because there seems to be a trend. The minister, as part of her keynote, highlighted something about researchers not coming back. The chair of the event at the launch of the report also noted that it is rare for researchers to come back. And then there are so many other positive impact I can cite too, but obviously because of time, I'm not going to dwell on that. Why does this matter? Why does data validation matter? It matters for policy and all the things, the fragmentation I talked about in the beginning, because it could be a pathway to bridging silos through shared evidence, improving legitimacy both for the researchers and policymakers and implementers. It strengthens implementation because communities can challenge the findings and or agree, and then obviously there can be conversations around pathway to implement and what needs to be done. It leads to or could lead to equitable fisheries governance or oceans governance in general, and provides impetus and justification for co-management, preparing communities for participation in fisheries governance. So this is my call to action. If we are serious about inclusive oceans governance, then it is important to make validation mandatory. That's important as data collection. If we think we can't do research without data collection, especially with human, of course, we shouldn't even think of it. We should also almost always plan the validation. What it does, it empowers communities to use the data to continue the work beyond the lifespan of our research. Then funders should consider funding validation because this is not always something that is taught out. And then measure for epistemic inclusion and require co-ownership. I have to note that our research have worked and continue to work so far because it's not something that we thought of in St. Andrews and then brought to Ghana. Rather, it's something that from the beginning we have been thinking about together and continue to think about to this point. Oceans governance is not only about conservation or security, especially as it relates to the African continent. It is about who produces knowledge, who validates it, and who gets to shape the future of these ocean spaces. Thank you so much for listening. I'd like to acknowledge our research team. I hope you can see all of them. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ife. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I can imagine how was your face when the community were saying thank you for sharing the findings with them since they don't have that experience of people coming back to them. Thank you. We'll take our second speaker, and after that, we'll have time for questions and answer. But if you have questions for now, you can write in the chat or wait until we get to the question and answer session. Thank you, Daniel. You can share your screen.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So let's go right ahead. So thank you very much, Cedric, for inviting me to give this webinar. It's always a pleasure for me to share the work that we do in Costa Rica, which is a small country in Central America. And yeah, just thank you, Cedric, for inviting me, and thank you everyone for listening and hearing me talk for a while. I'm going to talk, maybe give you a little bit of a personal presentation and just tell you more about myself, my work, and the different challenges and the different stuff that happens in Costa Rica if you ever want to become a marine conservationist. So my story is very particular. It starts in Costa Rica in 1990 when I was born. My two parents, my mom and my dad, are also biologists. They met while they were studying biology in the University of Costa Rica, and they became these very passionate sea turtle biologists and conservationists. One of their first jobs that they got after graduating, after getting their bachelor's degree, was to be the park rangers of this national park that was being created in Costa Rica, and it was a national park that was created for the conservation of leatherback sea turtles, which are the largest species of sea turtles and one of the most critically endangered species of sea turtles that we have in the world, right? So they were hired to become the park rangers of this newly created national park, and they would go out every night looking for the leatherback turtles deploying their nests, laying their nests. And at that time, they were recording between 1,500 to 2,000 leatherback nests every year. However, as they were looking at the threats and they saw that this population was declining severely, and during the following years, even though they do not work in this national park anymore, we have seen the leatherback population decline drastically. And now we receive only maybe one or two leatherbacks in this beach where we used to receive thousands just 30 years ago. So seeing this impact that was happening on the turtle population kick-started their passion to become conservationists. And then in 1998, they started their own conservation NGO here in Costa Rica, and is the NGO where I am working right now. And as you can imagine, for me, being involved in this journey, as their kid, since a very young age, it was very clear for me that I want to become a biologist. And being a biologist in Costa Rica is like a privilege, right? We have 5% of the world's biodiversity is located in Costa Rica, and it's a very small country. So you can go from the mountains and the rivers, go to the ocean and look at the sea turtles. You can work with bats. This is one of the largest species of bats that we have in Costa Rica. And, being a biology student in Costa Rica just gives you so much opportunity to learn about our nature. And it kickstarted also my passion to, we need to do something to protect it. Uh, this nature, this biodiversity is Costa Rica's biggest treasure. And if we don't protect it, then it could be gone. And then, however, being the son of my parents, marine conservation was always something that always attracted me. And Costa Rica is very privileged. We have the Pacific Ocean on one side, and we have the Caribbean Ocean on the other. And then in both of the oceans, you have these crazy amounts of biodiversity, right? You have in the Caribbean side, you have coral reefs. And then in the Pacific side, you have these big currents that attract all these amazing, huge wildlife like whale sharks, like whales, sea turtles, giant manta rays. So, starting to becoming more advanced in my biology career, marine conservation always attracted me. And then at one moment, I decided that, yeah, maybe marine conservation is a place, and the ocean is a place where I want to work and where I want to do most of my stuff. However, the path was not easy. When I graduated university, I have to be honest, I was not the best student. My grades were not the best, and it took me a while to finish my degree in biology here in Costa Rica. And by the time I finished, I was a bit fed up with academia, and I believed that I couldn't find my space in there. So I decided to become a professional diver. As soon as I got my bachelor's degree, I moved out of Costa Rica and I decided to move to the Dominican Republic. And I backpacked over there and I lived in a small coastal town, working in exchange of getting my diver certifications until I became a professional dive master. Then after becoming a dive master, I was said that I was going to be, working the tourism operation in Costa Rica, and I came back with the goal of setting my own dive shop in Costa Rica. However, things are like super competitive. I was trying to look for money to get up this thing going. And then my dad reached out to me, right? He had this project going in the organization, and he told me, Daniel, why don't you come here? You help us in this small scale fisheries project, and then you can get some money, and then you can get your diving operation going. So I was like, yeah, of course. So I decided to work for my dad and the organization temporarily in this small scale fisheries project where I used to go every night with the fisher folk, go out fishing, come back the next day with the catch of the day. We would measure the fish, we would take volunteers and interns that would help us. And we had to catalog very nicely everything that all of this fishing community were bringing to the shore because our goal was to certify them as a sustainable fishery. We work with the women in the community, we work with the youth, and we organize these small scale fishers in order for them to become certified as a sustainable fishery. So I was working in this project with them for a while. And then I was going out with the fishermen every day, every night, going out fishing. Um, and then we noticed that in the rocky reefs, very close to where these fisher folk were working, we were seeing these hawksbill turtles. And hawksbill turtles have a particular story because they are a critically endangered species. They have been hunted for several years because people take their scutes in their shell and they create crafts and art, frames for their glasses and stuff like that. Um, so we were noticing that there were a bunch of hawksbill sea turtles hanging around the rocky reefs where the fishermen were fishing, and I thought like, oh my God, there's a bunch of hawksbills. This is an endangered species, very charismatic, and nobody's doing anything to protect them. They are interacting with this fisherman a lot. We are trying to create marine protected areas in the region. So I thought hawksbill sea turtles could be an amazing tool to promote marine conservation within these communities. So I started, taking data on the hawksbill sea turtles that we were observing. I started talking to people to see where were they looking, where were they seeing more hawksbills. And I started this small project where I was gathering data on the hawksbill sea turtles that were in the area. And I was looking for funding and looking for funding. A lot of rejection happening. I was writing proposals and getting rejected all the time. But then, in the conservation field and being in this wheel where we have to constantly keep writing proposals for small grants and being rejected and doing it so much, of all the rejections comes one or two people, that believe in you and support your work. And for me, that happened when I applied for an EDGE fellowship. And I applied for an EDGE fellowship. That's a program from the Zoological Society of London that funds conservationists in the global south that want to work with endangered species. Um, and I applied for this project, and then one day I got an email that said, Danny, congratulations, you are being selected as an EDGE fellow for this cohort. This was in 2018. And this cohort will be very special because this project is not only being funded by the Zoological Society of London, but Joel Sartore from National Geographic also have decided to fund our project. So the EDGE fellows from that year we're not only EDGE fellows, but we're also National Geographic explorers. And then suddenly I have the support from National Geographic and the Zoological Society of London to carry out my research with the hawksbill sea turtles. And then this changes everything, right? You get this opportunity from these amazing people. You suddenly become a National Geographic explorer. You have this flag. You put the yellow rectangle in everything that you do, and suddenly everybody's interested in what you're doing. The people from National Geographic took me to their headquarters to one of their explorers festivals, and we were giving a talk about, the story that every animal deserves. And they gave me a space to talk about my story and about the hawksbills. And then suddenly this kid that was just, that was counting hawksbills with the fisher folk now is in Washington, D.C., talking to everybody about hawksbills. And then you come back, and then suddenly people are very interested in what you're doing. And then authorities are like, maybe we need to listen to this guy. So that's when my career actually started. And becoming a National Geographic explorer really opened my mind because, I don't have to tell you, National Geographic, it's an amazing communication industry, right? They have the magazines, they have the TV shows, they give talks. And a lot of the support that we receive as National Geographic explorers is how to tell your story, and how to become a storyteller. And if you are able to tell a compelling story using, your voice, using amazing pictures, using cool videos, then suddenly things start changing because everybody likes a good story. It doesn't matter if you're a biologist, if you are a lawyer, if you work in communication, or if you are a high school student. If you are able to tell a good story, everyone will support it and everyone will be compelled by it. So that's when my mind started shifting from a scientist to a storyteller, and trying to use my story and the story of DC turtles to attract funding and to being able to keep this project going. Then, I started working with the schools in Costa Rica, with the kids of the fishermen. A lot of these kids are sons and daughters of fisher folk, and then a lot of them don't even know how to swim. So we would take and we would put swimming vests on them. We would take them to the water. We would capture the turtles with them. They would be able to swim with the turtles. And through the project, we were also doing research, and we realized that DC turtles are very local, and they don't do these long migrations as other species does. So for these kids, it's very cool because we keep catching and we keep seeing the same turtles in the same reefs every day, every year. We are seeing how the turtles are growing. All these turtles have names now. They have been adopted by the schools. They have been adopted by the local community. And now we have been talking with the decision-making authorities. And thankfully, when this project ended, we managed to protect a couple of rocky reefs from fishing. Those are the reefs where the hawksbills are hanging out more. So using everything, that the knowledge from communication, working with the local communities, using science, and working with decision-making authorities, we managed to change some regulations and create safe spaces for these sea turtles to hang out. And like I said, this whole project with National Geographic made me believe that conservation problems usually have a core communication problem. Usually scientists are very good at communicating their things to other scientists, but then the message get lost when they want to tell their scientific findings to the regular people out there, to the people that are not trained in science, right? So I believe that our goal as scientists, communicationists, and conservationists is to make science more human, and to find ways to tell our science through compelling stories that are able to reach everyone out there, not only other scientists that are interested in the papers that we publish. And then that changes everything, right? Suddenly I'm going to schools to give talks about sea turtles. Now the project is expanding. It's not only in these coastal communities, but the people in the capital are also interested. The Zoological Society of London took me to London to talk about the project. I'm going to auditoriums to talk about the project, and I start to become this communicator and this person that just, sharing the story of hawksbills around the country. And then that managed to get me to go and find the master's in the UK. I have a friend that called me and said, Danny, there is this program in the University of Cambridge called the Masters in Conservation Leadership. And we believe you are a very good fit for this program, and we would love you to apply. So I was like, Cambridge, really? I wasn't very a good student. I wasn't a good student in the University of Costa Rica. My grades are not the best. I'm not sure if I can be good enough to go to Cambridge. And they were like, just apply. We really believe in your work. And this program is not only focused on academic goals, but also on, we are looking for conservation practitioners that want to take this course and want to expand their knowledge. And we believe that, you could be a great fit. So I decided to apply. And in 2002, I got the call from the people at the program, and they told me that I was accepted in the program and that I was going to get a full scholarship. And now I am in one of the best universities in the world, getting trained by conservationists, and taking our story of turtles one step even further. And now I'm getting to, I'm expanding my network in a way that I couldn't even believe. I am meeting people from all these different conservation organizations around the world. And I know that being a person in the global south and having to rely on these institutions that are very focused on the global north, like, universities, like, organizations like Nat Geo, it can be conflicting, but in a way I can tell you that all the people that I have worked with, from the Zoological Society of London, from this program in Cambridge, and from National Geographic, we have always been very open about colonization and about our role in decolonizing conservation and focusing our resources in the people that matter in the global south. So I really recommend these programs, and I really recommend using these tools as a way to get your story out there and to be known, and to secure funding for your projects, for your local communities, and make sure that the money that's being invested in conservation is in the right hands. So then I came back from Cambridge, and I was talking to my parents. They are getting older. They are wanting to give their projects to the new generation of conservationists. So we decided that I would become the new executive director of our organization that is called the Rescue Center for Endangered Marine Species, or CREMA. And I have been working as the executive director for the past 2 years, trying to expand our projects. And now I have been tutoring master's students and bachelor students to do their work with the hawksbill sea turtle populations. I have been involved with the tourism operation business as well, trying to get tourists into becoming citizen science citizen scientist and carry out conservation projects. We have also always kept our work with the fisher folk, trying to involve them in our monitoring and trying to take as much data that we can from their local knowledge. So the organization is expanding. We have been securing a little bit more funding. I have been working together with my mom and my dad, trying to administer the organization and to expand it, and just trying to, reach out more and carry out more meaningful projects, and just trying to shift a little bit the mindset of conservation projects that they had like back in the 80s and 90s, and now trying to adapt it and incorporate all these new tools that I have been learning in the different leadership projects that I have been involved with. Now I am also a fellow from the Global Diversity Foundation that has the Communities and Conservation Fellowship, which is how I met Cedric, and which is also why I'm here. Right. So I really want to encourage everyone, like if you see any of these opportunities focusing on leadership and conservation, please, these are great opportunities that will really rocket, your career. We also work in policy. Last year, I was in the IUCN World Conservation Congress, promoting a motion to protect hammerhead sharks around the world. And once again, the different training that I've had in communication and public speaking now, gives you the confidence to stand and to grab the mic and talk in front of thousands of people in one of these congresses and convince them to vote for the motion that you're proposing. And thankfully, we were proposing this motion for hammerhead sharks to improve the conservation status of hammerhead sharks around the world. The motion was approved, and thankfully we can take all these documents now to other conventions that can actually allow us to create new management laws and trade regulations for hammerhead sharks around the world. And then I just want to end by sharing with you the Edge of Existence fellowship program, that it's a yearly program that focuses on funding conservation projects from leaders in the Global South. Like I said, this was the project that changed my career. So if there is anyone interested in applying, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I can help you develop a nice application or give you more information. And hopefully we can have more Edge Fellows in the future, and we can expand our network of conservationists in the Global South. Thank you. That's all that I have to share for now.
Wonderful, Daniel. Thank you very much for taking us through your story from your childhood until now. Thank you so much. It's not every day that we have this kind of presentation where you take us through your personal story. I feel connected to that story. And if you also feel connected or you have a question or comment, please raise your hand or already on mute and ask the question or place your comment. If you cannot open your mic, you can also drop your question in the chat section. We do have time for some questions. There is no question. People are happy. Thank you so much. During the two presentations, I took some notes, and that the notes are about what was coming on the regular basis, and I'm taking you with me to see if we can associate that to marine conservation in the Global South. The notes that I have are the words, and they are passion, family, storytelling, community, policy, feedback, sharing, data, fishing, Ghana, validation, rejection, explorer, BBNG, and there are also a lot of words that I didn't take. But the biggest word that I took is opportunity. So I believe that from your two presentations, marine conservation in our context, in our developing countries, can be seen as a set of challenges where there are opportunities. And thanks to Ife and Daniel, we have the way to take that opportunity, to take advantage of that opportunity through getting connected to each other, getting connected to founders, knowing what is happening in the other places in the world. And something that is coming next, I'll share my screen, is the IMCC 8, as I mentioned earlier, is the 8th International Marine Conservation Congress, which is another space where you will have the possibility to present what you are doing, to also invite the other marine scientists you know in the global south to share, to network, to learn, and also to get connected with funders. It will be in Scotland from November 13 to 17. A grant will probably be available for student and early careers. Invite you to keep an eye on the SCB Marine website and social media platform to have information about that. The call for application for abstract will be open soon. The applicant will be able then to apply for a small grant to also attend this conference. Thank you very much once again, Daniel and Ife, for being here, for giving us this wonderful presentation, and for making us to understand that marine conservation in the global south is all about opportunities. My name is Cedric Fogwang, and I'm based in Cameroon at the African Marine Conservation Organization, and it was a pleasure for me to be your moderator today. Hopefully, we'll have another session soon, and you will be informed about the next activity of the SCB Marine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Cedric. Bye. Thank you, Daniel.
Bye. Thank you.